everyone, it's Katie and Mike. Say hi, Mike.
Hello.
Well, we saw a mess of a movie tonight.
A mess.
An enjoyable mess in parts. But man, oh man, was this a mess. Agreed?
Yes.
We went to see Tomorrowland. And, God, how do we start this thing? Because it's a mess. That's, like, the main thing you should get out of this, is that, like, lots of good parts, lots of interesting ideas that do not come together very well.
Yeah, what I would say is that there is possibly a good movie in here, but this movie was sort of flawed through editing and direction.
Should we talk? Let's just talk about the parts that we actually genuinely liked. I really liked the protagonist. The girl, well, they said her name like 20,000 times.
Candace, I think, or
no,
maybe?
It's not Candace. Casey.
Casey.
But she's played by Britt Robertson. A little too old to be playing a teenager, to be honest, but whatever. It's basically CW casting, where it's like if someone in her 20s. But she was really good. I liked her a lot. I thought that she was charming. She had, she got to do stuff. For once, we have a female character playing the she can save us all savior character. So if you're gonna do it, I would prefer not to be another white boy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I appreciated that. And I thought she held her own really well, and she had a lot of good moments, she did the jokes well,
Yeah, she was a good character. I liked her.
Yeah. And then, while there are certainly problems with this character, I did like how Athena, the robot... Oh yeah, Athena is a robot, surprise, if you didn't catch that within the first, 2 seconds of her being on screen. But she and Casey actually had a lot of great moments together, and I found them really engaging. And I gotta say, even though they focus way too much on the backstory of George Clooney's character, George Clooney is the grumpy curmudgeon. I like the fact that he's getting into those roles, and I thought that there was a lot of nice humor about that. You know what I mean? It was nice to see him just play a grump, So,
yeah, he did that really well.
As far as some of the inventions were interesting. We actually I think you might have been going out to get food during Age of Ultron, but when we first saw Age of Ultron, it included the majority of the robots coming to get them at his house scene. I don't think you saw most of it, but I saw a good portion of it, and I was thinking oh, this movie looks...
No, actually, I saw all of that scene. Okay,
well, they also had the part before where she actually sneaks in and everything.
Oh, that was in the 3D too?
Yeah, where she was sitting in the rain, that bit. But you saw most of it, but so there were definitely elements of it that were interesting. The problem is... Honestly, I think a good portion of my problems with this movie is if they had cut out the first 20 minutes of the movie, and just because what happens is... And
they structured the first 20 minutes so oddly.
I know, and it's so boring. It gets so boring because it's mostly 3D, and then we're supposed to so the first 30 minutes, maybe 20 to 30 minutes of this movie is actually following... Well, it starts off where it's George Clooney, recording, and he's oh, now we're going to tell you the story about how we got to this thing. And so it's oh, so you're basically telling me that you and the girl both survive. That's the first, 10 seconds of the movie, is basically setting up the idea that the stakes are nothing. Which is terrible, because later on it's you find out that the world is in grave peril, and it's well, apparently it isn't that much, because we know from the very start that there is zero probability, despite the fact that there's 100% probability of disaster. It's well, clearly not, because we were told specifically
at the very beginning
first shot of the movie that everything's fine. So that happens. And then they're like, oh, well, you should start at the beginning. So then you see like this 20 minutes of him as a little kid going to the Inventors exhibit at Disneyland, and then getting
Actually, I think it was the New York World's Fair.
Oh, the New York World's Fair, but it was connected to Disneyland somehow?
Well, I think the original Small World ride did appear at the World's Fair.
Okay.
I believe that's part of its history.
So, and then it turns, like, this little girl tells him, like, take this pin and follow us, but don't be seen, but go into the Small World ride. And then he magically ends up in this wondrous Tomorrowland world. And then he tries to get the rocket that he built to work in there, and it's just like, it's a very long scene. It's a really long scene. And it shows you a lot of Tomorrowland in a way that's not super appealing, because it's just like a bunch of 3D, but nothing really happening. And so, well, not 3D, but like, but computer animation. And then it gets to the girl's story. So it gets to the girl's story, and it's a lot of what you've actually seen in the trailer a little bit earlier, where you actually see her, she's trying to stop this construction from dismantling Cape Canaveral. This movie gets preachy. That's a thing about this movie. And don't get me wrong, I am very pro NASA. I am very pro innovation. I'm very pro, like, using our resources to build a better tomorrow, all those things. But man, this movie just crams it down your throat that everything is...
If you're not working for a brighter future, you're part of the problem.
Yeah, basically. And again, there are some decent points. Like, but it's done in like a really black and white way, which is a problem. Should we do spoilers for this one, do you think?
Oh, we're gonna have to at some point, because I've got complaints.
I've got complaints too, especially about the last like 30 minutes of the movie. But yeah, there's the thing about this movie. You have to go in being very skeptical of how preachy they're gonna get, because they really are, in a way that's like really annoying. Especially for people who actually think about these issues anyway, but seen in a way more complex. You know what I mean? Like, there are people out there that don't just ignore these problems, but also understand that they're way more complex than this is a bad way to think about things. Why are we fixing things? That's
you
like
just don't throw an android to explode in a giant cylinder and fix everything.
That's a bit of a spoiler, but okay.
Not really.
Anyway, but we finally get to the part that you've seen a lot of the trailers. She's gotten into, she got locked up for trying to sneak into this construction site in order to dismantle it, or to break down the equipment, and somehow she gets a slap on the wrist for that, even though it's like, it's basically, I think it's still NASA property, and like she'd be breaking into a government organ. But nothing about that makes sense to me. But you see the part in the trailer where she picks up the pin and suddenly it's magical.
See, This is another thing. Like, I thought she was so much more interesting in the trailers when I didn't know why she was being held by the police.
Yeah, I thought that too.
And when you had a character who's, maybe her,
like a juvenile delinquent or something.
Yes, exactly. And
I have a counterpoint. But do you want to finish your...
Like, I kind of like the idea that maybe she was a little bit more on the wrong side and then got steered right. That might be a better story arc. But then I don't know how well this movie gets structured.
That's the thing. The one thing I will say about it is that there a lot of times when they do the whole "you're the chosen one" blank, a lot of times there's no reason for them to actually be chosen. I like the fact that this character is already smart, has already tried doing things, not in a particularly good or functional way, but like she's already in that proactive setting, and you know what I mean? Like she already has that proactive mindset. So it makes sense for the little robot girl to say she is the one she's the one that I should choose.
Yeah.
To do this, because the robot girl has one pin left, and she chooses. So I liked the fact that the girl already, like, she doesn't have to be particularly guided in her viewpoint. She already has this idea of the, like I said, like, you know, proactive. She has agency already.
Yeah, it works better in the plot that they developed, but I'm just saying it's a less interesting maybe character.
Maybe, but we get back to my point. So in the trailer, I thought the trailer was super effective because you do not expect for her entire surroundings to change as soon as she touches the pin. So like you're surprised. That gets completely any sense of wonder gets cut. Not because you've already seen the trailer, but because you've already seen Tomorrowland largely in a very boring way, with George Clooney. Yeah, with George Clooney's backstory. It would have been so much more interesting and so much more show and don't tell if they had started off with her story, even if they kept in the whole her dismantling stuff, you know what I mean? But start that off. That's the very beginning of the movie, is her. Maybe even you can have a little narration from George Clooney, but keep it kind of vague. When, you know, make it so that it's not like he's definitely survived what they go through.
And even if you want to keep Clooney's backstory,
you could put it in later.
What you could do is you could edit it to start the movie like, you know, 60 years ago, and you have George Clooney bring the stuff to the World's Fair. The girl likes him and hands him the pin, and then you just cut to today.
Yes, that would have been great, because then
it doesn't undermine the whole reveal.
Yeah, and then it would have been so much better. Yeah, that would have been so much better, because we don't really need to know how he got in, because that's not how everybody else gets in anyway. Like, that never comes back, how he gets in. So, like, the most interesting parts for me really were the parts where she was trying to figure out all that stuff, you know what I mean? She was trying to figure out how to get there. That, you know, it was that whole innovation and her being smart enough to figure that out. That was some of the most interesting parts for me. Besides that, then the timer goes out on the pin, so the rest of the time, then she's trying to track down someone else who's had the pin. And then it comes to, oh gosh, what is his name? It'll come to me in a second. Keegan Michael Peele, Keegan Michael Key, because Peele is the other guy in Key and Peele. But no, this is the sad thing. So Keegan Michael Key and Kathryn Hahn are both shop owners in this, and I think, all right, this is kind of a spoiler. Should I bring it up later? My frustration with their characters.
You know what?
Do you want to just go into spoilers?
That's getting into spoilers. So let's talk some final thoughts here.
Okay.
And then we'll go into spoilers, because we're going to probably complain about this movie for another 20 minutes.
Yeah. So I will say, I don't think it's worth going to see in theaters. It would be a decent rental if you just like watch it on a decently sized screen at home. I don't think it's worth the money. We didn't see it in 3D, but honestly, like, you could see the parts that were going to be like, woo, 3D.
I know the AMC by us didn't have any 3D showings of this film, and I think all the 3D showings are being eaten up by Fury Road, because they want to milk that for as much as they can.
Yeah, they really can. It was okay. Like I said, if you're interested in it, I don't think it's worth. I think it's definitely like a Netflix watch. I found some things about it, especially towards the end, to be infuriating. But even ignoring that, the whole organization of this movie is such a mess. And just in my head, I was thinking of how they could clearly restructure it to make it a lot better. just, and like I said, part of it is honestly just cutting out that part, because anything you learn about those characters later on kind of is fine. Like, I didn't need to know more about Frank and Athena's relationship than what you find out after that first scene. You know?
I was kind of thinking because they built so much on it that I thought that they were going to give some payoff with their relationship, but they don't.
Or payoff for some of the other things that like occur in that scene, because there's a lot that just doesn't do anything. Mm-hmm. It really doesn't, and it's like, I don't know. It didn't need to be there. We talked about on the walk. I remember there's at least one trailer that really plays up the idea of these like great, mostly men of history, being the ones who founded this. That was cut out almost entirely. Like, it was vaguely brought up that, who was it? Edison, Tesla, which was hilarious because I whispered to Mike, like, they hated each other. They wouldn't work together. And then the movie just casually says, oh yeah, they hated each other. I was like, oh, good save there, movie. But it really does, like, those things kind of annoy me because of how much non-white dudes get erased from history as far as scientific and artistic achievements. There's a lot. Like, it's not that hard to Google search to find out just how many have been, like, either completely ignored or actively taken out, like, actively erased from the history books. So to pick up the ones that you just recognize from the history books and saying, like, oh yeah, those are the ones that did this, not any of those other people that we're not going to mention. I'm glad that they didn't do that, but you do get this, like, if you saw the other trailers, especially because, like, apparently Disney was a big part of this movie. Like, Walt Disney was a big part of this plot at some point, because I saw the trailer that specifically brought that up.
Yeah, I remember that being part 2, but, I mean, like, even so, in the 50s flashback, you could tell that originally Disney was some kind of major plot point or something, because the ride to the It's a Small World ride is the ticket into Tomorrowland.
Yeah, and it was like, and he goes in, part of the World's Fair is like mega Disney. Like, there's a lot of Disney stuff. And then it just drops. Like, the whole thing, the whole Disney connection completely drops, which is...
Oh, also another thing that really sort of irked me a little bit, like that was sort of a little bit weird, was that whenever you saw shots of Tomorrowland or like the old World's Fair, it always felt like watching those Disney commercials. You know, because there's always families and kids just like, oh, the kid gets a Peter Pan hat. And I'm like, where did he get a Peter Pan hat? And
you know what else bothered me? Honestly, that first, because, like, I will say the actual, when she goes into Tomorrowland, when she uses the pen and goes in, there, you know, you can tell it's CGI, but because it feels like one long take, there is still that sense of wonder. And, like, she sells it, you know? Mm-hmm. But in that first scene with Frank going in, it was so freaking boring. Like, how do you make a jetpack flying through the air boring? But somehow, this movie did it. And it really made... And again, it completely
undermined the rest of the movie.
It undermined the scene later with Casey finding it first. If we're supposed to see it through her eyes, but we've already seen this before, it doesn't work. And it's frustrating. And it's like, and then, this movie.
Like I said, there's an underlying, possibly good movie here. They just probably didn't shoot enough, and they had to do with what they had.
Well, yeah. And it's so, like, again, I watch it for the main...
I don't know how many times they like, went through reshoots with this movie, but this movie definitely needed some script work and a reshoot at some point.
I will say, if you're going to watch it for Britt Robertson's performance, because I really did. I'm rooting for her to get better, or to get good roles, because she did good in this.
She did really well.
This role could have been really easily badly done, and I found her super charming. I liked her scenes the best, and I don't know, like, I am pro that character, and her two kind of cohorts, were okay, but I at least liked her, and I liked the fact that that they gave that kind of very overused trope of the chosen one to a teenage girl who actually was fairly capable. So for that, I would rent it. But if you want to find out why we're so annoyed about this movie beyond just the bad editing, stick around for spoilers. Do you have anything else to say before we go to spoilers?
It's just mediocre, and you could see good parts in it, but it's just blah.
There were some things that I genuinely liked, but there was a lot that just,
fell flat.
That fell flat and actually lessened the parts I liked.
Yes.
So that's about it. So, to the spoilers. So, Mike, what should we talk about first as far as this movie? Let's talk about the little girl robot and George Clooney romance, shall we? And how freaking weird that was and uncomfortable.
Kind of really weird. It was at least okay and sweet during the flashback, but it got really weird really fast.
Yeah, and I guess it helped that, he kept talking about her in the past tense when he talked about his feelings for her, so it's not as bad, and, yes, I realize that technically the robot is not actually a child, but it's hard when it's a young actress under the age of 13, I think.
Who
probably
gets a romantic... Hollywood just keeps casting younger for George Clooney. I mean, at some point, George Clooney's
so
going to have a romance scene with, an 8-year-old or something.
Gross! It's so gross! Yeah, so... Because the robot doesn't age, and I understand the logic.
Well, the robot technically ages, but it doesn't age like a human grows. It just, gets older.
Okay, Mr. Pedantic. I'm technically correct. So, that was weird. And that was the thing. The big climax of the movie is she is damaged to the point where she's going to be shut down. And apparently, it is something that's set up kind of early to make it really easy for is basically when the robots get turned down, they suddenly explode, which seems like if you wanted to, be able to salvage parts.
That seems like a really bad idea to have the robots immediately self-detonate when they get shut down. It's like,
imagine if your Xbox red ringed and it suddenly was like, you have 10 seconds to get out of the room. That's what this was. But it works for a plot point because they had to explode something, and their one detonator they had to throw away because they couldn't get it close enough. So then...
Here's the thing. You could have robots in the robots in the real world that'll, killing anyone that figures out anything. That makes no sense. But let's forget that for now. But it's okay for them to have self-destruct, protocols or whatever. But why would you do it for the little girl robot that's recruiting people?
You're yelling at our audience, Mike.
I don't know. I can edit it down. I can make audio. I forget what it's called even now.
All right. Anyway. Oh, but so what I was talking about.
Why is every robot programmed to self-destruct?
With Keegan, what was his name? I swear to God, I can't remember. Keegan Michael Key. I want to make it, and Catherine Hahn's character. So again, they are a biracial couple that own a store that the girl goes to because they were selling one of the pins. Here's the thing. So I was like, oh, there's a biracial couple. That's kind of progressive for they're robots.
Murder bots.
They're murder robots. Yeah. So I'm trying to think what else was dumb about this movie before we get into the big parts.
How about the robots that just go around chasing everyone and killing anyone that dare question something
in broad daylight?
They just murder cops right out on the street.
Now, I will say this much. They did say, we're not really worried about it anymore because it's the end of the world. But then why did you care about them doing shenanigans? Why did you have to... worry about that if it wasn't going to be a problem anymore, and it was basically like...
If you believe the future is so set in stone, then why even try?
all the plot holes in this movie. This was like one of the worst villains I've seen in a long time, because his everything about him did not make sense. And he ended up having...
He's not even really villainous. He's just sort of the guy who's controlling the murder bots.
Yeah, so he's like the head governor of Tomorrowland, and he's played by Dr. House. And essentially, they have this connection... they have this, like, machine that predicts when the world's going to end, and they know
No. What it is, it's a machine that reads the tachyon particles and whatever, and it basically shows the future by reading the tachyon particles.
But they basically figured out that, like, after...
The world is going to end 100% chance at, like, in 60 days.
It was like 62 to 58, I think, by the time that goes. So, alright, so... Here's the big... So, the girl's like, oh my god, what's gonna... This can't be right, and it flickers. So George Clooney's like, look, it flickered because she said that there was a chance, and therefore, something, she is the chosen one. I don't know, but...
She still has hope.
She still has hope, and therefore she can save us somehow. Which, fine. Yeah, I read Harry Potter. Whatever, we can convolute this. And this movie is convoluted. It is convolution in its entirety. But what they realize is that, like, wait, the tachyon machine thing is actually being broadcasted to his place on Earth. So what if they were actually broadcasting into everyone's minds and sending them the message that the world is doomed, and that's why we're all so negative? It's like, K. So, fine. Let's just go with it. Like, that was not great, but I could buy, like, okay, this is an alternate universe where that's what happened. And they're like, oh, well, all we have to do is shut it off and then, like, give people reasons to hope for it, and we have a chance. So they go to the governor, and they explain this to him, and then George Clooney comes to the realization, oh my god, you were doing this on purpose. Now we get into the dumbest part of this movie. Do you want me to try to explain, or do you want to explain? How do you want to do this?
You do it. Go ahead.
I will try, because next is what follows is Dr. House giving a good, 2 or 3 minute rant that sounds like your uncle when he gets a little too drunk at Thanksgiving, about how everyone gave up on the world, and they thought that if they had sent the message that the world is doomed, that people would get off their asses and do something about it. But these people who aren't innovative, all these people on Earth that aren't creative or innovative anymore, they just embraced it. It's like,
this is how he exactly said it. He said, we told the people on the Titanic where the iceberg was, and they they just said, full steam ahead, we're gonna crash right into it.
This is the problem. Actually, a couple things. One, if you tell people through a psychic link that the world is doomed, and you put that into their brains, and you don't give them any context, of course they're not going to. Of course they're like, what do you think is going to happen? And then him using that as the reasoning for why they shouldn't just tell people, or why they shouldn't try to help the Earth, is stupid. It's stupid. But even worse than that, guess what? The problems of humanity are not simple in nature. Like the war and genocide and industrial pollution is not going to be changed because we are all having hopeful thoughts. Okay? The world is way more complex than that. And it is really kind of insulting that the whole idea that all the normal people, all the regular people on Earth were just not positive enough to fix it using positive thoughts. That's kind of really, really insulting to everyone who's actually trying to come up with solutions on their own, which, by the way, is, tough. Also, I know that there was at least one part where it was just they might have shown a volcano or like a tornado or something. There was some natural disaster. I'm like, are you really
blaming natural disasters?
People weren't positive enough. Now there are tornadoes. Let's just blame all of Kentucky for not being positive enough. And that's why Tornado Alley destroyed everything. It's that kind of stuff. And yes, and that's the thing. This movie is very preachy. And it's preachy about stuff that's way more complex than the movie is giving it credit for. And that's a problem. And again, you got this bad guy who, and the good guys never really say, no, that's not true, or say, you're the one that gave them that didn't give them another option. You're the one that gave them, anything. No, instead it's well, we better turn that machine off now that you've been putting that in their brains for
30 years.
30 years. And yeah, and also, the great innovators of our time didn't think, maybe we're the problem.
Also, you remember the movie, what was it? Where, was it Thank You for Smoking, where it was the ad executive was we want them to be smoking in space, but it's a full oxygen environment, so how do we solve that problem?
And so they're we'll just make something up, and thank God for the flux capacitor that just, so we can smoke in space again. And I'm deoxygenator.
Was that Thank You for Smoking?
It was Thank You for Smoking. It was the guy from Parks and
I was never more reminded of that scene until I saw, right when they got to Tomorrowland again, this is another point, but, and Governor Nick steps out the same age as he was in the flashback.
Oh, and then he was I've been drinking my shakes.
It comes in chocolate now.
Too bad you're George Clooney on Earth, and now you look like George Clooney. You don't look like George Clooney from The Facts of Life anymore, do you? No.
I've stopped my aging thanks to milkshakes.
So, this movie, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. Weird robot, not subtext, romance, non-subtext. Oh, that was awkward, and she sacrifices herself. But mostly, the biggest problem with this movie, to be quite honest, at least is that it really does it oversimplifies very large problems of our world, and it does it in a way that is very condescending and very judgmental of people who are just... There's also this idea, too, that oh yeah, we need to find all the innovators, and they get to come to the amazing utopia.
And then abandon Earth.
Yeah, but man, if you're a cashier somewhere, fuck you. You're gonna have to be an explorer on the safari, or making a new car with your iPad, or they do this whole thing. And I will give them credit that when they do the whole giving pins to people, a little montage of giving pins to the great innovators of today, they did a good job of having those characters be played by very diverse, you know what I mean? It wasn't a bunch of white dudes. It was actually a lot of diversity in that group that you see at the very end. And they do show a street musician. But it is very much it feels very much like only creative, innovative people get to, you know what I mean? There was that sense that only a certain kind of thinker gets to experience Tomorrowland, which is kind of a gross idea.
It's very sort of
I'm trying to think of the
what's the thing that the guy that Disney might have been a little bit fond of, and he was
Marx?
the Ubermensch. Was that what they were called? blonde-haired, blue-eyed.
Are we really? Wait, are we really Godwinning this?
I don't know.
I mean.
Thinking about it how you just described that's all that popped into my head.
No, what I'm thinking of more is but just the idea that I'm trying to think of what maybe humanist, which I'm sure someone, if we were more popular, someone would yell at me for misusing the term humanist. But there's a lot of the idea of everybody having a function, and the people who are more the innovators are more important than everyone else, that sort of thing. There were some parts of this, but mostly the biggest problem with this movie is really the idea that we just weren't trying. We could have solved world hunger if only we were more positive. We could have helped. We could have helped the Ukraine not be hurt by Russia in the last 2 years. If we were more positive, why aren't we more positive? We could have made Ferguson not happen if we were more positive. What were you doing, random person in the audience? You weren't being more positive enough. It's condescending, and it's convoluted, and it's super damn preachy. And those are the big problems with this movie. As much as there were parts that I actually liked, it felt like they just would stop the movie to be preachy as hell.
Yes.
Also, didn't they basically say that George Clooney created the thing that would actually... he created the big ball machine thing, right?
Yeah, they said he built that machine.
And then he was also on the broadcast it to Earth. So...
I think Nick, from what I gathered from trying to figure out this movie, because they don't really straight up tell you anything but you're destroying the world, I think Nick's turned the machine into an antenna to broadcast.
Okay, so he did that on purpose.
Nick's, I think, did that, and that Clooney just built it to read tachyon particles, but Nick's actually just modified it to start broadcasting those thoughts.
That was just so the dumbest. It was so... I saw a couple of non-spoilery reviews, and they said that the villain's motivation and reasoning in this was really bad. I did not realize how bad it was, but it really was they clearly couldn't think of anything else for him to do, so they gave him the dumbest ideas ever, which for a movie that's supposed to be about genius and innovation is pretty sad.
I don't know. If Tomorrowland is trying to, let the world go to hell, I would think they would do it in a much more creative way than what they did.
Yeah. Also, it's not like he's giving. The whole idea was we tried to give him a fair shot. You clearly didn't. When they only had vague ideas in their brains about. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Vague ideas of, and again, as if people there aren't good parts anyway, as if all of the human rights organizations in the world, as if all the charities in the world, as if all the coalitions to actually help be innovative now. You know what I mean? It not only is it that they're blaming people for horrible things in the world, all of us horrible things, but it also completely ignores the actual innovation that I get it. NASA is not doing super hot right now. Okay? I get that's a big part of your reasoning that people just gave up, but clearly there are lots of different places on Earth, lots of different people that are making a difference. So it's very also simple-minded to pretend like every single person on the face of the earth except for our protagonist has given up hope.
Weird thing here, the father's a NASA engineer, and they're dismantling the rocket platform that he lives near. If NASA's dismantling the rocket platform, why does he have a job there? Is it his job to dismantle? Is that...
explain it.
Why does he lose the job? Shouldn't he be out of a job now? And then he's And then the other thing is like, and then I'll be unemployed. Oh no!
Look, they didn't explain
a
this.
NASA engineer won't get a job after that with some other engineering firm or something.
Only NASA, Mike. The only engineering business in all of America is NASA. That's what we've learned from this. I will say, all right, I will give this credit to. There was a great moment where she almost loses her hat. By the way, I don't think she gets that hat back, and I'm kind of bummed. I wanted to see the hat come back because she loses it in Tomorrowland, and I really wanted at like the very end for her to like find it like in the rubble, and she go, "Oh sweet, I got my hat back." But that didn't happen. Anyway, but especially because it kind of became a plot point because like when they escape George Clooney's house, they land in this lake, and she almost loses the hat. And he's like, just get another hat. And she's like, no, it's my dad's hat. And he goes, oh, I get it. Your dad never respected you. So you need it. You've been carrying this on. And like, as a reminder of, like, he brings up this whole, and she's like, no, I have a great relationship with my dad. My dad's a NASA engineer, and I want to be just like him when I grow up. Oh, you were,
talking about yourself.
Yeah,
there.
you were projecting that onto me, weren't you? And I thought that was a great moment because you don't, like, it's so tropey to have the dad doesn't believe in you. And it's like, no, that's not the problem of this character in this particular movie. But it's great that you just assume that because you had a horrible relationship with your father. You know?
It's fun that George Clooney is wrong a lot.
Yeah, and I will
It makes him a good grump.
He was grumpy. I liked his grumpness. And I didn't even mind how he started to believe in her. Like, that didn't bother me that much. That was kind of done okay. Not great, but okay compared to some of the problems in the movie. There were just some dumb things about this movie. And again, I don't think you need to see it in the theater. I think you can easily see it as a rental. Especially because the CGI kind of, like... Some of it was fine, but some of it where it was clearly just the entire scene was just CGI was just gunky.
Yeah, it always felt like
I could
really good copy of SimCity.
Again, I think the best part of the CGI really was her exploring Tomorrowland because you kind of knew that it was supposed to be kind of otherworldly and kind of a projection, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, so, I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I got nothing. Do you have anything?
Not really. I could probably come up with more complaints if you gave me more time, but I think we've ramped it around for a while now.
Yeah, like I said, go into this with I know that this is against the heart of the movie, but go in with it with a fair amount of skepticism. And realize that like the movie has a good amount of moralizing that it does, and be prepared for it, and you can probably still enjoy parts of it. Again, it helps to be prepared. That's about it for us. Katie and Mike, check out justplainsomething.com, and we'll see you later.